It is 8:30 in the morning on May 18th, 2026. Mohammed Mahoudi, a Finnish technical diver, puts his regulator in his mouth and enters the water of Vavu Atoll. He knew exactly what he was doing. He was an elite military operator, specifically trained for rescue dives in extreme conditions. He had personally presented the operation plan to the president of the Maldives.
He knew the depth, he knew the currents, he knew the cave system that had killed 5 people 2 days earlier. He entered the water with full awareness of all this, and with equipment appropriate for that mission. Mohammed Mahoudi died on the way up. He did not die inside the chambers. He did not die stuck in a narrow passage. He died during the ascent, an ascent that was too fast. Desperately fast, from a depth of 60 meters, at a speed no safe diving protocol allows and no trained diver executes, unless the alternative is worse than the risk of going up like that. The decompression sickness that killed him is not a beginner's accident. It is the result of a decision, conscious or not, to abandon protocol and get out of that place as fast as possible. The dive lasted 3 hours. When Pakarinen came out of the water, he had gone where no human being had gone and returned. And what he found inside explains, at least in part, what happened to 6 people in that chamber system, but only in part. In the previous episode, we left 3 questions unanswered. What did Mohammed Mahoudi see before he shot to the surface like that? Why were the Italians' bodies exactly where they were found? And why did experienced divers with years of experience in Maldivian waters enter a cave at 60 meters without the proper equipment to get out? In this episode, we are going to answer 2 of these questions with what the Finnish team discovered inside the chambers. The third one, what Mahoudi saw, may never be answered definitively. But what we know now changes the way the question needs to be asked. When Sergeant Major Mohammed Mahoudi died on May 16th, the Maldivian authorities made a decision that said everything without needing to say anything. They suspended operations, not for a few hours, not because of bad weather. They suspended the operations because the Dekunu Kandu chamber system had killed 6 people in 2 days, and because the institution that had sent Mahoudi, the MNDF, the Maldivian National Defense Force, concluded it no longer had the human capability to enter that environment safely. This kind of conclusion is rare for a military organization. Armies do not like to admit that a mission is beyond their capabilities, but it was an honest conclusion, and it was the decision that opened a window. Because if the MNDF could not do it, they needed someone who could. The call went out to Dan Europe, the Divers Alert Network, the world's leading dive emergency organization. Dan Europe drew up a short list of who in the world had the technical profile for that specific mission. Deep cave penetration diving in strong currents using closed-circuit systems, with the ability to navigate without a pre-laid guideline, and with a proven track record of recoveries in overhead environments, enclosed spaces where there is no direct ascent to the surface. The list had 3 names: Sami Pakarinen, Jenny Westerlund, and Patrik Granqvist. All 3 are Finnish. All 3 use closed-circuit rebreathers, and 2 of them, Pakarinen and Granqvist, had done exactly this before. In 2014, in a cave in northern Norway called Plura, one of their friends died during an underwater exploration. Pakarinen and Granqvist went back to recover the body. That story became the documentary Diving into the Unknown, winner of international awards. What this means is that when Dan Europe called them to the Maldives, they were calling the only people in the world who had already entered a cave to recover someone who never came out, and who had returned to tell the story.
The 3 arrived in Malay on May 17. They did not dive that day. This detail matters. Pakarinen, Westerlund, and Granqvist spent the entire day in preparation. They studied the cave profile with the MNDF. They consulted Italian authorities. They checked the equipment. They planned entry and exit routes. They defined mission abort protocols, the specific points where, if anything was off, they would turn back without trying to go further.
This is the exact opposite of what the Italian investigation suggests the 5 Italians did on May 14th. On the morning of May 18th at 8:30 a.m., the 3 entered the water. The dive lasted 3 hours. They penetrated all 3 chambers of the Decunu Candu system. They found all 4 bodies of the Italians, Monica Montefalcone, her daughter Giorgia Samacal, Muriel Adanino, and Federico Gualtieri, in the deepest chamber. Recovery of the bodies was carried out in 2 subsequent operations. Monica Montefalcone and Federico Gualtieri were brought up on May 19th. Giorgia Somacau and Muriel Adanino were recovered on May 20th. In total, 6 days after the disaster, the 4 people that we said in the previous episode were in a place no human could safely reach were back at the surface. What changed? 2 things: equipment and protocol. They used underwater scooters, DPVs, to neutralize the currents that had hindered previous operations, and they used a guideline from the very entrance. Because when Sami Puccarinen spoke to the Italian press after the recovery, he did not say that the Italians were reckless. He said something more specific and more disturbing. He said that the equipment the 5 were using was not cave diving equipment, that it was not great for that environment, and that he and his team would never enter such a system without a reel and a guideline. But, and this but changes everything, he also said it may not have been a conscious decision to enter the cave, the sandbank drift theory. Decunu Candu is a strong current channel near the island of Alimata. There is evidence, according to analyses released after the recovery, that a sandbank in the area may have altered the diver's orientation during descent. In strong currents, as depth increases and pressure raises nitrogen levels in the blood, spatial disorientation becomes a real risk. The most likely hypothesis emerging now is not that the 5 Italians decided to explore a technical cave with recreational equipment out of bravado or deliberate recklessness. It is that they ended up inside the cave because the current and the underwater topography funneled them there, and that by the time they realized where they were already too deep to get out easily. Which turns the accident into something even harder to process, because the version of deliberate recklessness, the one where someone makes a bad decision and pays the price, has a cause and effect logic that the human mind can hold on to. There is a responsible party. There is an identifiable mistake. There is a clear lesson to be learned. The version of involuntary drift does not have this clean logic. It has an underwater topography that no one had properly mapped, a current that none of the 5 could overcome, and a chain of events in which each individual step made sense at the time, yet the final outcome was catastrophic. Here is what the Decunu Candu chamber system reveals on a larger scale. The difference between recreational and technical diving is not primarily about courage or experience. It is about protocol and equipment. A certified recreational diver, even an experienced one with hundreds of open water dives, is not trained for 3 specific skills that the cave environment demands: navigation in an enclosed space without any visual reference to the surface, gas management in an overhead environment, and executing decompression stops in strong current conditions. Monica Montefalcone had a scientific background in marine ecosystems. She was a university professor. She had published papers on corals and hydrozoans in the Maldives. She knew those waters. But knowing the open waters of an atoll is not the same as having the equipment and protocol to navigate a submerged chamber system at 60 meters in strong currents, what the dive industry calls an overhead environment. Any setting where there is no direct descent to the surface has a mortality curve that does not scale linearly with diver experience. It scales exponentially with distance from the exit and with the absence of a guideline. And there is a statistic documented repeatedly by the Cave Diving Association.
Approximately 95% of cave diving deaths involve divers who lacked specific training for that environment or who were not using a guideline. 5 Italians. 6 deaths in total. All 6 fit this statistic. What makes Vavu different from other cave diving accidents is not the scale, although by any measure it is one of the largest cave diving disasters in history. It is the level of technical competence of the people involved. Monica Montefalcone was not a tourist. She was a high-level scientist who knew that ocean professionally.
Federico Gualtieri completed a thesis on corals in the Maldives under her supervision. And yet, what Vavu reveals is that the barrier between competence and mortality in cave diving is not the kind of barrier general experience can cross on its own. It is a barrier of specific protocol, specific equipment, specific training.
And that barrier remains invisible to those standing outside it, because from the outside it looks like waters you already know well. On May 22nd, the Italian Public Prosecutor's Office opened an investigation for manslaughter. Manslaughter is the legal term for a death caused by negligence, not intent, but the absence of the care required by the circumstances. The Italian investigation is following multiple paths simultaneously.
The first is the operator of the Duke of York, the live-aboard vessel that took the Italians to Vavu Atoll. The operator, Abdul Musin Musa, stated publicly that the boat was licensed for recreational diving up to 30 meters, half the depth at which the Italians were found. He said the divers were informed of these limits when they boarded.
The second path is the special permit the group had obtained for dives down to 50 meters, already beyond the Maldivian recreational limit of 30 meters, but not including 2 of the 5 divers and not covering cave diving. The third path is the University of Genoa, where 3 of Monica Montefalcone's department colleagues were interviewed by Italian investigators and handed over laptops, external hard drives, and phones belonging to the divers.
The question this investigation needs to answer is not simple. Who knew what and when? If the boat operator knew the group planned dives deeper than the permit allowed, that is negligence. If the special permit was issued without checking the group's equipment, that is a regulatory failure. If the group entered the cave deliberately with inadequate gear, that is something else again.
What makes this investigation unusual is that the main witness to any conscious decision to enter the cave is dead, and the distribution of the bodies, Gianluca Benedetti at the entrance, the other 4 progressively deeper, matches both an intentional exploration gone wrong and an involuntary drift that turned fatal before anyone could react. All 5 Italians' bodies were repatriated to Italy. Gianluca Benedetti, who had made the Maldives his permanent home and who knew those waters for years, was the first to be found, at the entrance. The position of Benedetti's body, at the cave mouth, not in the inner chambers, is the only physical clue that may one day answer the question of what the group intended to do when they entered that system. If he was at the exit when he died, he may have been trying to get out. If he was at the entrance because he never fully went in, the involuntary drift hypothesis grows stronger. The Italian forensic reports, once completed, may bring more clarity. But there is one question no report will answer: what Mohammed Mahoudi saw.
The Fens entered the same chambers with different equipment, different protocols, and came back out. What this proves is that the chamber system is accessible with the right combination of technology and training. It does not prove what Mahoudi found when he reached the site on May 16, with different equipment, with currents that may have been different, in an environment where 4 bodies had been decomposing for 2 days.
The Finns described the internal environment as technically extreme. Pakarinen said in a later interview that the visibility and current conditions inside the chambers were the most challenging he had ever faced in a recovery operation. And the Finns are the only human beings who have ever entered that system and returned with what they went in to retrieve. Mahoudi did not have the equipment they had. He did not have the guideline they had. He did not have the scooters they had, but he had the same elite military training,
the same knowledge of the operational plan, the same awareness of the risk, and he ascended as if none of that mattered more than getting out. Mahoudi's dive computer recorded every second of that immersion: depth, time, ascent rate, the full profile. As of the moment this video was recorded, those data have not been made public by the Maldivian authorities.
When they are, if they are, they will show at what point in the dive the ascent began and at what speed. What they will not show is what existed at that point that made a man trained not to panic act as if there were no other option. That answer lies inside the chambers. In the topography, no official map has fully described yet. In the currents, no public measure on May 16. In the visibility, no official report has documented. And possibly in an internal chemical environment that no analysis has yet been carried out to verify, the gas hypothesis, the one we raised in the previous episode, the one that remains technically plausible while the Italians' reports are not yet complete. It has not been confirmed, it has not been ruled out. The Italian and Maldivian investigations run in parallel. Neither has been concluded.
And until they are, the death of a soldier who went in to retrieve people who never came out and whom he also could not bring back remains with the only explanation the facts can support without speculation, that the Dekunu Kandu chamber system is a place where human beings pay a very high price for the privilege of entering, and that the only way to survive is to bring with you exactly what that environment demands. The Finns knew what that environment demanded. Mahoudi went without it.
And the question that remains, the question no document will ever completely answer, is whether he knew, while he was in there, that he did not have enough.